How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Perfect Reload Weekly. My name is Steve. This is where we take a look back at the week in video game news, and I'm joined, as always, by Christian Slater. Christian, how you doing this week?
You know, I don't appreciate you unplugging me last night. I'm sorry if I was screaming John Cena's entrance song a little too loud for your baby ears.
Yeah, that's not the reason why I unplugged you. I unplugged you because I was hoping it would maybe kill you, but you're still here, so I guess I'm still here. Interesting week this week. You know, channel's still doing well. Thanks again, everybody. You know, looks like we added a couple of new subscribers, so if you're checking this out for the first time, welcome. Kind of one, you know, I guess big release, not really, you know, the biggest release in the world in terms of video games in general, but for a large subsection of a niche of an audience. Like, I don't know, the AEW video game Fight Forever came out this week. It's the first like true, I guess we would say high budget. I don't know how high the budget was on this game, but the first true mainstream wrestling competitive game since the TNA game, which I believe was over a decade ago at this point. So it's pretty much just been WWE every year, except for the 1 year that they took off. So that in it of itself is kind of interesting because, you know, it's always good to have competition. You know, we've seen a lot of sports games that don't have any competition. Some of them just never really get out of the rut that they kind of created for themselves because they don't have a competitor to push them. You know, Madden's had a lot of problems for a long time. I would say that they've definitely been on a downward trajectory since the NFL 2K game stopped being made. You know, I know that there are a lot of complaints about NBA 2K with all the microtransactions and gambling aspects and just the always online kind of push that they've made. But I will say that the actual gameplay of that game still gets better every year. They still do a really good job, and the show as well does really well. I think that the show kind of makes very minor changes, and I think they are very much lagging behind you know, NBA 2K in terms of what can be done with the sports games in terms of options and features and all that stuff. And then NHL has kind of always been treading water, especially ever since, you know, they lost their last competitor, which again, over a decade ago at this point, well over a decade. I think it was 15 years ago. It might even be at this point. So, you know, having another wrestling game for wrestling fans to choose from is pretty cool. I put up a video last week on the day, well, it was technically the day after the game came out. I recorded it the night the game came out. It came out one day early if you bought the fancy $80 Elite version, which I did. So I messed around with it. You know, it was just kind of first impressions. That video kind of caught on. It got more views than I kind of thought it would. You know, I came across very negative in that video, and that certainly wasn't my intention. But to be honest, there weren't. At first glance, you know, that video really was a true representation of my first impression, because at that point I'd only played the game for a couple hours. And I played the game while recording the video. Initially, I was going to do like a pre-recorded thing. Like in the afternoon, I was just going to film myself playing for a little bit and then, you know, insert footage here kind of thing. But there were so many things that I wanted to point out. I was like, you know, I think it might be more effective to actually show you what I'm talking about, you know, instead of you just taking my word for it. And I think that kind of made for an interesting dynamic. And I think that's something that I wouldn't mind doing in the future again, should an opportunity arise, you know, where it makes sense. And so I definitely came across pretty negative in that video simply because there wasn't a lot of positives to talk about at first glance, you know, after your first couple hours with the game. So I ended up playing the game more on Friday afternoon, and then we streamed the game on Friday night. So if you want to check out the stream archive, it's up here on the channel. And I'm coming around on the game. It's not taking away any of my gripes with the game. My complaints are still there. I thought maybe the further I dug into the game, maybe some of those complaints would kind of go away, but they haven't. They're still very valid complaints, you know, big issues with the game. It's missing what I've said are very common sense features that I think a wrestling game should have. So if you want kind of a more detailed thought process on that, check out that video and then, the stream as well, because you can kind of compare and contrast, because you can see during the stream, I'm having fun with the game. I genuinely had a fun time playing it on stream. I have had fun playing the game. It doesn't change my opinion that I guess if I don't review games, it's not really what I do. But let's say I was going to review that game on a 1 to 10 scale. I would probably put it at a 5. I know that sounds like super low because everybody's so used to the IGN scale of everything is an 8. If it's lower than an 8, then that means the game is complete trash and garbage. I don't subscribe to that. I think you should have a more realistic rating scale, but I realize that is not possible because so many video game publishers hold their developers hostage, essentially. Your game better get an 85 or above on Metacritic or we're not giving you bonuses, that kind of thing. Or you better get an 85 or above or we're shuttering the studio. I think a 5 is a fair representation. A 5 on my scale is not bad. It's just not great. It's a very middle of the road game that has positives and negatives. I would say probably more negatives than positives. The way I've kind of always thought, if I was ever going to seriously get into reviewing games, because at one point I was trying to I applied for a couple of things to write video game reviews at one point. But I realized that the way that I would want to do it would never ever work with an existing outlet. I would have to kind of do my own thing. In the way I've always looked at it was the Uncharted games, Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. So Uncharted 1, I would give a 6 because it was a good game that had a lot of problems. Uncharted 2, I would give a 10. That game is a masterpiece. It's absolutely incredible. Uncharted 3, I'd give a 5 or a 6, not because it's flawed, but it just doesn't push it forward. It's a perfectly serviceable game, but it doesn't improve things. And that scale would just never make sense. I'd have to, it would just be too convoluted at that point. I was like, what? I think maybe I shouldn't review games. But AEW Fight Forever, like I said, I'm coming around on it, and it has some interesting features. Christian, you were hanging out while I was playing. You have any thoughts on the AEW game?
I got arrested once for trying to wrestle someone. Apparently it's frowned upon to grapple with the staff at Williams-Sonoma after dousing yourself in free olive oil samples.
Yeah, I would say that it is, man. All right. Cool. That was provided no help or context to this conversation, but yeah, thanks, man. So I think that the story mode, which we messed around with a little bit on the stream, it's very goofy. It's very silly. All of the wrestlers are definitely out of character because I think it just assigns wrestlers to these pre-planned roles. And it's very much kind of a throwback. The game wants to be a throwback to the Aki style games of WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy, WCW, NWO Revenge, all that stuff, the N64 wrestling games. And gameplay wise it is, but in terms of the story mode, it reminds me more of the early SmackDown games on the PS1 and the PS2. Where you had these existing wrestlers that have characters, they have gimmicks on television, but in the video game world, they're just inserted into these weird situations. So they're doing things that would never make sense for them. And obviously it provides a lot of humor. There's whole YouTube channels based around, old SmackDown storylines and stuff like that from those games. So that's a lot of what this is. Everybody's just kind of it's generically written, but it becomes funny because it's well, that character would never do that. We were playing as Eddie Kingston, and if you know anything about Eddie Kingston's persona or character that he portrays, he is very much a no-nonsense, does not think before he speaks, just will punch you in the mouth instead of, thinking about it for a second and seeing if it's even a good idea to do so. And just him ordering avocado toast, or him sitting at a dining table in an empty restaurant, drinking a full bottle of champagne and eating a 3-foot wide piece of pizza, I think the woman said. So it provides that kind of zaniness, which is, it's just fine. It's a choice, and it's not a bad choice because the WWE games, they've tried the humor thing throughout the years, and there's still humor. They try pumping a lot of humor into those story modes, but for the most part, they follow a fairly I wouldn't say realistic in terms of wrestling, but a more grounded story, I guess. Like one of the big stories in the single player mode in WWE 2K23 this year was like, you get fired from WWE and have to work your way back. Like that's like a thing that has happened. Like there are wrestlers that's their career trajectory. So it's not, out of the ordinary. Whereas the AEW game's like, oh, John Moxley's stealing my luggage. I need to go fight him to get it back. Like, it's a little bit looser with things, but I've come around on the gameplay. I still think the controls are like it's tough to describe unless you actually like physically get your hand on a controller and play the game. They feel a little like tight. Like there are definitely times where I feel like I'm fighting with the game, like I'm pressing a button, it's just not doing it. Like you press left bumper or L1 when you grapple to like go behind your opponent, and there are times where I have to hit it 2 or 3 times for it to actually register that that's what I'm trying to do. There are times where I press the run button and there's like a 1 to 2 second delay, or sometimes it won't even run. The pickup weapon and Irish whip button are one and the same. So I would say well over 50% of the time I tried to pick up a weapon, I was just like phantom animation. I was animating towards nobody because I wasn't near my opponent. So it's definitely kind of odd in that regard. Those are issues I think that probably could be like patched. I don't know how much like post release work they're planning on doing in this game. I can't imagine the game is like selling gangbusters. We'll see, because the United States doesn't really announce sales figures. It's kind of up to the developer to do that, whereas in England they do. So when the charts come out next week, I guess maybe we could check the top 10, see if it cracked the top 10. It's going to be tough because there are so many big games that are still selling so many copies that are in that top 10 that I don't know if AEW can get in there. And obviously that's only numbers for, the United Kingdom or England. It's not going to factor in, the other territories in which the game, released in. But it's, I wouldn't pay $80 for it. That's for sure. I don't regret it because, I would like to support them in hopes that they can make a second better game. And also, it provides me content for this channel, so it's kind of, I don't necessarily look at it as, I just wasted $80. I paid $80. I got $40 worth of video game, and I guess $40 worth of me being able to talk about it across multiple videos on this channel. I don't know, think about it as like a business expense at that point. If this game was $30, if this game, I think even $40 would be pushing it a little bit. I don't know about $40. I think doing it digital only at $30 probably would have been the better choice. I'm sure not the better choice financially for THQ Nordic and Ukes, but in terms of the eye of the consumer, I think $30 digital only probably would have been a more palatable and digestible amount of money to spend on the quality of game that you're getting in return. But I'm going to stick with it. I'm not getting rid of the game or anything like that. I bought it digitally, so it's, it's mine until Xbox tells me I can't have it anymore. So I'll be playing more of it. I don't know if we're going to stream anymore. Maybe that's possible. I was going to stream last night, actually, while I'm thinking of it. 2 nights ago for you guys, if you're watching this on Monday. But the internet was just not cooperating. We've been having some storms and stuff, and I don't know if maybe that was related to it, but yeah, so I wasn't able to stream. So, we'll stream this coming week. I know maybe even tomorrow, Tuesday, because it's a day off for me. Maybe we'll put something on during the day or something. I don't know. Well, I'll let you know. Always keep an eye on that community tab. That's where I post scheduled notes and things I'm going to do and all that. So, all right, so the only other game that was new that I played this week was Dave the Diver, which is kind of a 50-50 mix of scuba diving and catching fish and items and working in a sushi restaurant.
Man, you look like you could pack away some sushi, huh, Tubby?
Fuck off. And I can. I like sushi. Sushi is good. So the game, I have mixed thoughts on this game. I think it's a good game. I'm not super into games where you hurt animals and kill animals. It's not really my thing. So I was a little bit put off by that. You're very early on attacking fish with knives and harpoon gunning animals and stuff. So it's not, it's just, that's my personal take on it. For other people, they're not going to care. But for me, I was like, do I really want to play a game where half the game is me like just murdering innocent animals? Like, But gameplay wise, it is good. It's a well-made game. It's been getting really good reviews. It's been picking up a lot of attention. IGN reviewed it very favorably. It's interesting, you know, the writing is not terrible. It's very cliche driven. It's very trope driven. So you yourself, the player character you play is Dave. Dave is kind of an overweight, middle-aged man who goes scuba diving. He gets roped into running a sushi restaurant with this man named Cobra, who you find out through dialogue. You've known each other for a while. He seems like he is some international spy kind of thing. He makes allusions to like weapons dealings and fighting terrorists and stuff. And you meet some characters along the way, like the chef in the sushi restaurant, Bancho or Banco. I'm not sure how they're pronouncing it. There's no voice. It's all it's that Charlie Brown shit that's becoming very popular in games these days, where it's just like whoa, 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 you know, instead of actual words. There's obviously text, you know, subtitles on the screen, but the chef Bancho is very much that. He's pretty much the trope of like the ancient wise kung fu master that you would see in like Shaw Brothers films. You know, like the kind of stuff that influenced Kill Bill. He's very over the top. You know, he gives you a compliment and you thank him for the compliment, and then he yells at you for thinking that compliments mean anything. You know, he's constantly yelling at you to do better, to be faster, like all this kind of stuff. And then you meet like this guy who makes weapons for you, and he is very much the South Park World of Warcraft guy. He's very, very overweight, neck beard, glasses. He's staring at anime figures. He's wearing like the biking gloves on his hands while he types. You know, it's stuff you've seen before. It's all kind of very, I don't know if I would say it's not like immature humor. It's not like, you know, poop jokes and stuff like that, but it's very, like I said, very, very cliche driven. But you know, the game itself is actually pretty fun. Like when you explore underwater, you know, you have an oxygen meter so you can run out of oxygen. So you only have a limited amount of time. The game is divided into like the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. You have to be at the restaurant to work in the restaurant in the evening, but you can go diving in the morning or the afternoon. While you're diving, you know, you're catching fish. You know, there are some fish that will attack you, so you have a knife that will fight them off. At one point, I found a samurai sword underwater, so then I could smack the fish with a samurai sword. If you catch a fish that's kind of big, you have to mash the A button to try and reel it in and collect it. You do have a weight limit. If you go overweight, you swim much slower. You lose oxygen much faster. But while you're down there in the water, you know, you can open up treasure chests and find oxygen tanks. There are escape points that you can find. So if you are like imminently running out of oxygen, you're not going to have enough time to move your character to the top of the screen to go, you know, to go above water, you know, it'll quickly come and get you and bring you back up. You will find people that want you to find special items. There's one woman that wanted me to collect X number of starfish. There's a guy that wants me to find an underwater race of sea people. So it seems like the more I play it, it has like a fantastical element to it, which I'm kind of disappointed in. I feel like that stuff is getting really shoehorned in games where it doesn't belong anymore. Like Tape to Tape this year is a roguelike hockey game, but it has like a Lovecraftian bent to it, and I was like, is it really necessary? And with this game, I was like, that's actually kind of cool, just like catching fish and finding these objects for people, and then you know, running the sushi restaurant. Like, I'm cool with that. Like, they can do enough of this with a story. And then there was like a cutscene where like a gigantic octopus or squid, I think it was a squid, was capsizing boats, and then you meet the guy that's like, there's people with gills on their cheeks and they can live underwater in this ancient civilization and all this stuff. And I was like, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily the route I would have taken with this. I really do, not to rehash what I just said, but I really do feel like that stuff is being shoehorned into games pretty hard these days. You know, there are a lot of indie games that are just like, here's a normal game on the surface, but wait, you know, everybody's under mind control and there's giant monsters lurking behind things. So it's just like, I don't know. To me, it feels... It just doesn't feel like it meshes well with it. You know, it just feels kind of unbalanced, but I would check the game out. You know, I played it on PC. I'm not sure if it's on consoles. Let's look it up real quick. Yeah, it is. Okay, it looks like it is. Oh no, it's not. I'm sorry. It is only available on Steam. Okay, so yeah, it's only available on PC right now. I think it was on sale for 18, so I'm assuming it's a $20 game. I think is what it is. But it's pretty fun. The sushi, like running the sushi restaurant stuff, is actually the most fun I had with the game, more so than catching the fish. So the cook is kind of off to the side. He is constantly cooking as orders come in. So you are waiting for him, but you get a visual indicator. There's like a meter that fills. When the meter fills up, he says, I think the word he says is dish, because like I said, they are speaking garbled language, but I think he actually very clearly says dish. And so you can go pick it up, and then it'll highlight above the customer's head who had that ordered. And the longer they wait, meters fill up and stuff like that. So you want to be like, okay, well, these two people ordered the same thing, but he sat first. I should give it to him. You can hold the button down to move faster down the table to bring the food to people. You do have a stamina meter. It will refill pretty much, right away as soon as you're done pressing the button. People ask for tea. And there's a pouring tea mini game. You can only pour so much, otherwise it'll like come out of the glass and spill. You have to set the menu, so based off the fish that you caught, it'll tell you, okay, this fish is going to bring in this much money when we sell it, and you only have X number of slots to fill on the menu, so you want to both have fish that you caught a lot of, you want to catch multiple kinds of the same fish, and then also fish that are bigger or more rare or whatever, they're going to cost more. Because the first task you have in the game is to make $100. And so you could sell, you could try and sell like a bunch of like $8 sushi, or you could go after bigger fish and be like, well, I can sell less, but I can charge 13, 14, 15 for this, this piece, that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of strategy involved in it. There are other like little mini games that pop up. Like sometimes somebody will leave a dirty dish and you have to press buttons to clean their area after they leave. There's wasabi is constantly running out. So if that meter gets low, you can run over there. There's a little wasabi grinding mini game to make sure that you always have wasabi, because you can no longer serve sushi if you run out of wasabi. So you're kind of always having something to do. There are times where you get pretty effective and you are just kind of standing there waiting for the chef to be done with the next dish. I'm sure as the game goes on, it gets more complicated, more people sit at the restaurant, there'll probably be less and less and less of that downtime. But there are definitely times where I was just kind of sitting there for a few moments like, okay, well, that's fine. I guess I can visually check my meter, see if I need to do anything. But it does a pretty good job of telling you where you need to be, what you need to do, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to, at least at the point in the game I'm in, you do not have to worry about serving the wrong food to the wrong person. They will very clearly highlight who is getting the dish that you have in your hand, so you can't give it to the wrong person. I don't know if eventually that'll go away or what, but as it stands where I am in the game, good to go on that end. So that was Dave the Diver. And yeah, I would recommend it. I would definitely check it out. I think it's a pretty solid game. So, before we wrap up with what I've been playing, and get into the news, I took a look today at the release calendar, because we're at the beginning of a new month. It's July now. And it looks like it's going to be pretty dead, at least for my personal taste, in new release games for the next 2 months. Honestly, until Starfield comes out at the beginning of September. So over the next couple of months, I'm sure there'll be some indie games that pop up, some smaller titles and stuff like that I'll play and check out. But we might be talking about some older games, so just prepare for that. This might be the time where I maybe get around to finally playing Forspoken this year. Maybe as the summer goes on, maybe I'll pick up Final Fantasy and play some of that and talk about that. But I'll kind of I'm constantly keeping my eye on these smaller games that are coming out to check out, because so many of my favorite games that I've played so far this year, like Terrascape, Terra Nil, these were smaller releases. Obviously I want to keep my eye on when some of these Steam Next Fest demos are getting their early access release or 1.0 releases or what have you. There is a demo that I missed, as I just wasn't aware of it, that is very much right up my alley. So I'm going to check that out, and I think I might record a video of that and put it up on the channel, so that look for that coming up soon. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to give a heads up that over the next couple of months, summer lag, I guess, in new game releases, at least in terms of what I'm interested in. So, give us an opportunity to kind of play catch up before we get into a very busy and crowded fall. So yeah, with that out of the way, we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right, we are back with the news, and South Korea is at it again. The South Korea Game Rating and Administration Committee, which has a long history of leaking things that it shouldn't have, has apparently leaked that there is going to be a remaster of the original Red Dead Redemption coming out. So Red Dead Redemption getting a remaster, I guess makes sense. I guess, getting it onto current systems, it is a very beloved game. So I assume it would, sell well, but Rockstar's history with remastering things has not been great. I don't know if maybe remaster is the right way to think about this, because when they did, they moved Grand Theft, remember Grand Theft Auto 5 was an Xbox 360 game. So it went from 360 to the next generation of the X and S, and now to the Series X and the Series S and the PS5. It was available on these things. And when they moved Grand Theft Auto 5 to like the current systems, they made a lot of improvements and tweaks and things like that. I think maybe that's more what they should do with Red Dead Redemption. I don't know if like a full-blown remaster is the way to go, unless they're, I don't know, because to me it seems like, is it really a remaster, or are they just kind of bringing it to modern systems, giving it kind of a little bit of a polish, fresh coat of paint maybe, or are they going to make gameplay changes and things like that? Because like, where do is it a remake, is it a remaster, is it just enhanced, is it just updated? Like, the terminology I think at this point kind of has become very nebulous. I think using the word remake, which they're not using the word remake. Remake to me is like when they say like the Final Fantasy VII thing, like where it's almost like a totally different. I mean, in many ways, it is a totally different game. They added a lot of new elements, not just gameplay wise and look wise, but also story wise. I don't think that's what they're going to do with something like this. But I don't know if remaster is the right word, because when you say remaster, typically that kind of comes out of the movie and music lexicon, where, with music, it's remastered, like mastering is a thing. Mastering is a part of the music mixing and production process. It's the final step before it's ready to be, released. You could remaster music if you get your hands on the master tapes, through the aid of new technology and getting the masters, actually having the individual tracks to mess around with. These days the kids call them the stems. You can really do whatever you want with that stuff. And with movies, they could they were literally taking actual film and digitizing it and remastering it that way, upscaling it and stuff like that. That's why a lot of older movies look so good on 4K. 4K equipment is because, having actual film, they can blow that stuff up to a higher resolution. It doesn't look as bad. But with video games, because there's so much more data, so much more process, there could be outdated tools and engine work that has to be done and all that stuff. I don't know if remaster is necessarily the correct terminology. It's a terminology that they're going with. But it's one of those things where it's like, wouldn't it just be enough to port it to the new systems? Or do they actually want to go in there and make changes to the visual style of the game? Because Red Dead Redemption 2, despite being a previous generation game, is still a strikingly beautiful game. It's really, really well done. The amount of detail and creativity in the world, with the objects and people, the scenery and all that stuff. Like, obviously, like some of the facial animations and textures, you can tell that this is not a current video game, like that kind of thing. We've had some really big advances, especially with like Unreal Engine 5 and all that. But the original Red Dead Redemption, I don't know, outside of making some like maybe gameplay tweaks to modernize it a little bit, like, do you really need to go in there and kind of futz around with the look of the game? I mean, maybe, up-resing textures or something like that. But, like I said, they tried doing this with with Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City and San Andreas, and it was a complete and total mess. I don't know, maybe they need to find a different studio to do the work. I don't think that Rockstar themselves has the resources to do the work right now because they are working on Grand Theft Auto 6. So I'm curious. I don't know if this game necessarily needs a full-blown remaster, remake, whatever, just maybe a port to the current system so people can play it in an easier fashion, I think would probably be enough. Because it's a classic at this point. I would say that, both Red Dead Redemption games are kind of classics of the past, 20 years. And they, there weren't a lot of Wild West games that were at the forefront of the video game conversation. There were games like Gun and stuff like that, but, Red Dead Redemption and Redemption 2 really kind of showed you what you could do because it's a tried and true genre for television and movies, but it historically wasn't a really big deal in video games, and they really knocked it out of the park with those.
I played a cowboy once, little movie called Dawn Rider.
Nobody saw it.
It may have been direct to DVD, but I wore the hell out of those cowboy boots. The trick is to fill them with baby oil so you have a naughty little secret. It really adds to the character development.
The hell is wrong with you, man? Every week you get weirder and weirder and weirder. But yeah, if it comes out, I don't know, maybe I check it out. I've actually been thinking about playing Red Dead 2 again. I really do love that game. I didn't think I would originally when they said it was a prequel. I was like, I kind of wanted more of John Marston, but we did get more of John Marston. He just wasn't the playable character, and they did such a great job with Arthur, and the whole gang and that whole world that it's a game that I think about a lot. I was like, man, I kind of wish I had that game laying around. I'd pop it in and play it for a little bit. But next up, we have more Starfield news, and this has kind of been picking up a lot of criticism because there was an announcement made that Starfield, or I guess Bethesda, is partnering with AMD instead of NVIDIA. So that essentially means that the game will only have AMD's FSR and not NVIDIA's DLSS. So if you're not familiar with that, so let's say, I'm not super well versed on this, but I think I could probably break it down plainly enough with my limited understanding of the technology. Essentially what DLSS will do is allow you to boost the performance of your game using this technology that's within certain NVIDIA graphics cards. It was a thing in the 20 series cards, but it really kind of gained traction with the 30 series cards. It allows upscaling, image processing, all that stuff. It basically allows you to do things you couldn't do if you were just setting everything to like max settings or ultra settings or something like that. And, I don't have an AMD graphics card. I haven't had an AMD graphics card since the early 2000s. But from every technical test and write-up and video I've seen, DLSS pretty much beats it out every time. There are more NVIDIA graphics cards out there for the most part than there are AMD graphics cards. So it would kind of make sense to go with, from a consumer standpoint, go with who has the majority, but this isn't a consumer decision. This is a money and a business decision, and AMD obviously gave them more money to do this. So there was a promotional video that came out. It was obviously filmed, I think, probably the same time they filmed that Starfield Direct. I think he's wearing the same shirt in it. I could be wrong, but it's filmed in the exact same location. It looks like the lobby of their building. But it says, let's see here. We built an all-new technology for Starfield Creation Engine 2, and working with AMD on that to make it look great and run great has been really special. We have AMD engineers in our code base working on FSR2 upscaling and image processing, and it looks incredible. So this is an addition to the article. This is from Kotaku. It says the announcement was light on specifics, including frame rate targets on PC and details about ray tracing support. So ray tracing on AMD cards is definitely not to the level that it is on NVIDIA cards. They have said that it's a hard capped locked 30 frames a second on Xbox, but they have not gotten into anything with PC. The PC system requirements came out. There wasn't anything really of note aside from it is one of the new games. It's kind of becoming a trend with some recent big releases that it is requiring you to have a solid state hard drive. You're not going to be able to run this off an external drive, your traditional external drive or, a 3.5 drive that you have in your computer. You are going to have a solid state drive. Actually, the amount of space it takes up, I was actually kind of surprised. It isn't as much as I thought. I think it's somewhere in like the 150 gig range. I honestly thought it would probably be a little bit bigger. So the announcement was getting a lot of slack, and it's getting a ton of criticism. Tom Warren from The Verge tweeted out, DLSS is massively superior to FSR2, so I don't understand why Microsoft Bethesda would sign a deal that will lock DLSS out of Starfield. These deals are simply anti-consumer and won't help AMD sell GPUs, build a better product instead. And yeah, that's kind of it. No matter how much AMD does to push itself forward, they have always and forever, not forever, they have always been lagging behind NVIDIA for at least the past 10 to 15 years. There's not a lot of people that are going to say like, yeah, go pick up AMD's card over a 4090 or a 4080 or even a 3080 like I have. It's strange. And, John Linneman from Digital Foundry, and Digital Foundry is really, I mean, these are like the most trusted people out there for this stuff. He tweeted out, if anyone with Bethesda is watching, please ensure that DLSS and XESS are supported. Don't make this another one of those AMD games with lacking features. It is weird. I think that this game is so big and ambitious in scope that, I mean, like I said before, if they pull off even half of what they said they're going to pull off, it's going to be an amazing game. And to know that you can't get the performance that you could get out of it is disheartening and disappointing. I've been lurking on the Starfield subreddit, just in case I miss any news or announcements and things like that. And it's been just a lot of people like, I honestly can't believe, I spent $2,000 on a computer and now I'm not going to be able to get the best looking version of Starfield that I can. It sucks, but this is also the problem with having like exclusive features like this tied to physical hardware. And especially when that physical hardware is so expensive. A GPU, a solid GPU is as much, or, actually these days, I mean, it's almost double the price of a PS5 or an Xbox Series X. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people that are just like, I just want it to run fine, and I'll just play it on my Xbox instead. For me personally, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth. I'm going to mess around with it on PC, if I decide to stream the game or whatever, but it's got the cloud save stuff, so you can just pick it up. And, when I'm done streaming and I want to keep playing the game, but I want to lay down on the couch, in the next room, I can just pick it back up on my Xbox and do it that way. So I'm going to be kind of going back and forth with it. To me, the graphics of the game on something like Starfield aren't the biggest thing for me, but I understand why it is for some people, especially people that are like, hey, I want the biggest bang for my buck. I'm more worried, not so much about graphics, but performance, and DLSS does help with performance. So it is saddening. I'm not really worried about ray tracing and stuff like that. I'm worried about performance. I want that. For my PC, the kind of PC I have, yes, it doesn't have 40 series and the current AMD processors or Intel processors. I'm a generation behind. But even with what I have, I should be able to get 60 frames a second out of that game, no problem, especially looking at what their requirements were. And if I don't, I guess I would be kind of upset, and then I wouldn't have the ability to have DLSS boost that for me. So, I'm sorry I can't do a great job of explaining exactly what DLSS does. I get lost in a lot of that technical stuff. There are amazing breakdowns of it, both from like places like Digital Foundry and Linus Tech Tips that can better explain it than I ever could for you. And so if you're a little bit lost with what I'm saying, because honestly, I'm a little bit lost with what I'm saying, because I understand it from a conceptual standpoint, but trying to then explain it, I realize that I'm lacking in a lot of stuff. So what I would do is, if you're kind of wondering what the whole deal with this is, go check out a video about what DLSS can do, and then maybe you have a different opinion on things. So it's disappointing, but hopefully this is the last of the bad news about Starfield, or not necessarily bad news, but disappointing news, and we move on to more positive things, and hopefully the game is not a broken pile of garbage when it comes out. So kind of our big story last week was the FTC versus Microsoft trial that's been going on. And I didn't know if I was going to continue to cover this, but there were a lot of interesting things that happened. And Tom Warren, once again, from The Verge, is the fucking man when it comes to this stuff, because he has an amazing article up on The Verge that breaks down a lot of what's going on. And I definitely recommend reading the article, but I am going to get some highlights out of here. And like I said, all of this is credit to Tom Warren from The Verge. We'll go back. We'll do this kind of in chronological order here. Christian, I know you have been following this case along with me. Any thoughts as they have kind of taken their break for the time being?
How are these people not in prison yet? Every time I've ever been to court, I was locked up within the hour. I guess it's the video game people that get special treatment these days. Back in the 90s, if you were an actor that had even a minor hit, you could murder someone in broad daylight and nobody would care.
Yeah, once again, man, for like the 100th time, this is not a criminal trial. No one is going to prison. I mean, I don't think anybody's going over to prison over this. But we'll go back and all right. Let's get some stuff going. So the judge here, Judge Corley, was bringing up questions because all of this is like hinging upon Call of Duty. You know, the FTC and Sony have been really priming this judge to believe that Call of Duty is the biggest game in the world, and that any platform that does not have access to Call of Duty would crumble and cease to exist in a business sense if they don't have it. So Judge Corley asked which Bethesda game, because then the Bethesda deal became a key kind of thing in all of this, because it came out that Starfield at one point, Sony was trying to get Starfield as an exclusive. So Judge Corley says, which Bethesda game is comparable to Call of Duty? The FTC says The Elder Scrolls is on the same level of Call of Duty, which is not true by any stretch of the imagination. Call of Duty sells way more copies. And FTC said that Call of Duty is, quote, so exceptionally valuable and so unique, which is not the case, because there are other first-person shooters like Fortnite that have way outpaced Call of Duty in terms of cultural relevance, money generated, and even fan, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, how pleased the fan base is with the games. All right, so next up here, let's see here. Which one do I want to grab next? So a lot of this is that they have been bringing up, the FTC has really poor evidence and is really kind of poorly making their case here. That's kind of been a big thread with all of this, is that the FTC is really struggling to have a coherent argument, because they very much do not understand the industry and the business that they are dealing with. And that comes up here because, like I said, Call of Duty is a crux to all of this thing. And Judge Corley then says a Dr. Bailey, who testified on behalf of Microsoft, said they actually looked at real world data and wants to know what the FTC witness Dr. Lee looked at. Judge Corley references that 62% of all PlayStation owners don't even play Call of Duty at all. They're not going to miss it. So if it goes away, it won't affect them. And Judge Corley then asked the FTC, how did you decide that Call of Duty is so important? And says then the note says they struggled to respond, and then referenced Jim Ryan of Sony's testimony instead of actually answering the question. And it's really bizarre, because they're so fixated on this one thing, and this one thing isn't true. And so you can see where that kind of makes a court case starting to kind of fall apart. So let's see what is up next. Okay. So then the next thing came talking about PCs, and they didn't understand how PCs worked. And the judge has this very weird expectation of the amount of money that people have in this country and around the world in general, and how much they're willing to spend on things. So there was she brought up the fact that you could play Xbox Series games on PC. Not all of them, but you can play some. And Judge Corley says, what if they have a PC? Why isn't everybody, particularly in 2023, likely to own a PC so they don't have to buy an Xbox Series X? The FTC responded, the gaming PC is a special kind of PC. It's not a run-of-the-mill PC. Judge responds, maybe I'm biased in the world I'm living in during the pandemic. Nobody did it on a bargain basement PC. Everybody had a $1,000 to $1,500 PC. Why wouldn't you be able to play on PC, have pressure on Xbox if you made the Xbox $1,000? So there's a lot of problems with what's going on there, especially this judge's expectation of people owning things. Most people do not own a $1,000 to $1,500 PC. People that are hardcore PC gamers do, absolutely, but that's not most people. Most people don't have that kind of disposable income, especially right now. And saying that nobody did it on a bargain basement PC during the pandemic, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because work from home people, there were kids getting sent home with Chromebooks that cost $100 to $200, and that was perfectly fine. I believe that this judge is referencing like how people started working from home, Zoom calls, all that stuff. That doesn't have the kind of draw on resources that a video game would have. So it's a very odd argument, and it just really goes to show that the judge definitely does not understand, much like the FTC does not understand how video games work, how this business works, how this industry works, consumer spending habits. A judge probably makes more money than the average person, so to them, having $1,000 computer, a PC, that just was like, well, everybody has that, right? I don't know a lot of people that actually have a traditional PC anymore. A lot of people just have a laptop and they play their games on a traditional video game console. I certainly know some people that have gaming PCs and things like that, but a lot of people don't. And even some of the people that do, sure as hell aren't spending $1,500 on it. Of course, some of them are, but many and most are not. Take a look at any hardware survey that Steam does. The most common graphics card is like 3 generations ago. It's not a 3080, it's not a 4080 or a 4090. It's like a 1080, These things that if somebody was building a budget PC today would not be spending $1,000 or $1,500 on, maybe $500, $800, equivalent in a way, more equivalent in a way to the cost of a console right now. Let's see here. The next thing, oh yeah, they also brought up that Elder Scrolls 16 is coming out in 2026. That is definitely not happening. They misspoke, but that was kind of a funny thing along the way. This is part of Tom Warren's write up. It says it's up to the FTC to argue their case here, and it's mainly been a single Microsoft lawyer arguing against a number of FTC lawyers. Both sides have now moved on to legal arguments and citing previous cases. Microsoft argues that it's all about Call of Duty at the core. Microsoft's deals completely address the concerns. And then Microsoft's lawyer brought up a good point and points to the new Final Fantasy and says Microsoft just lost part of that game. Final Fantasy is a timed exclusive on the PlayStation 5, so it's not coming out into the Xbox until a later date. And brings up the Minecraft situation where Sony specifically held back dev kits of the PS5, which is why there is no native PS5 version of Microsoft. So, Sony is just as guilty with these things as anybody, when it comes to this anti-competitive stuff that they're trying to bring out. All right, moving on as we get closer to them wrapping up. I apologize for kind of the pauses and breaks. I want to find stuff that's a little bit more relevant. If you want to read the whole thing, like I said, it's on The Verge. What about the Thor game? Judge Crowley wants to know about the Thor game, which is actually called, it's actually God of War. And it says that if Xbox puts a game as big as Call of Duty on Game Pass, wouldn't that put pressure on Sony to put God of War Ragnarok on PlayStation Plus? And that's an interesting question, because from the outside looking in, that would be a really good point, right? Like if you don't have a lot of knowledge of the industry and how these companies are working and what their business strategies are in 2023, that's a really good point. Like if Xbox has this really big game, this popular game, it's not as big and as popular as they're making it out to be, but it is still big and popular. And they put that on Game Pass. And they also, the way they word a lot of these things is it makes it sound like Game Pass is free. Game Pass is not free. You still have to pay for it. And actually the price is going up. We talked about that last week. wouldn't that put pressure on Sony to then put some of their first party exclusive titles on PlayStation Plus? But the difference between the two is the way that the businesses are run. Sony has gone all in over the past decade, even spanning back past a decade now, back to the Uncharted, when Uncharted was coming out, on these big budget blockbuster movie-like experiences that are single player, that are exclusive to Sony. And they want to sell you a PlayStation 5. Sony very much wants to sell you a PlayStation 5. They're really interested in getting you a PlayStation 5. Microsoft, on the other hand, has gone this library route. Instead of developing their own games, they have instead just acquired other developers to develop games for them. And Sony has done the same as well. Sony's picked up studios along the way over the past 10 years. Not as many as Microsoft has. But Microsoft realized that their internal development studios weren't cutting it. Okay, let's go out and buy studios. Okay, so they go out and buy studios. They just want them to make games. And they just want people to play those games. And they don't care how you play those games. They just want to make sure that you're paying Xbox and Microsoft for the ability to play those games. They don't care if you play them on an Xbox. They don't care if you play them on a PC. They don't care if you play them on a television, maybe through there's a Game Pass app on some televisions, you can do it through Nvidia Shield or something like that. Whatever it is, and they don't care if you play it on your phone. They just want you to play their games and in turn give them money for a subscription service that they call Game Pass and hopefully xCloud. Those are very two different forms of running a business. Both are valid and both, it seems, are working for both companies. So this idea that it would force Sony to abandon its entire business strategy if Call of Duty goes on Game Pass is kind of laughable, because it's not going to put pressure on them. People are still going to buy God of War and buy a theoretical future Uncharted or a Spider-Man or a Ghost of Tsushima sequel. They're going to buy those regardless. They're not going to say, like, oh, Call of Duty's on Game Pass, I shouldn't have to pay for the next God of War. Like, that's just not going to happen. That's just not the way this industry and people that buy video games operate. It's just not going to happen. This whole court case is very silly. But it is starting to seem like, a little bit at least, that maybe this deal with Activision is not going to go through. Although, if you read these recaps, you realize that the FTC is really doing a very poor job at arguing their case. They are constantly stumbling over things. They have had a habit of not answering questions directly, and it just makes them look bad. It makes them look unprepared. They just didn't do their homework. They needed to get somebody that actually plays video games in there. I'm sure they could find a lawyer that also plays video games, and they don't necessarily need to be the lead in the case, but have them on the team to provide reference points, talking points, things like that. So it's just, I don't know. The last thing I want to bring up is that the we've been kind of shitting on Sony and the FTC, but let's shit on Microsoft for a second. So the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said it's Sony's fault that there are console exclusives, which is laughable. There have been console exclusives since the first video game console came out. If that's the case, so it's Sony's fault, despite the fact that Nintendo had Mario only on Nintendo. Why didn't we have Mario on Sega? Why wasn't Sonic on Nintendo? These are just like these laughable things, because it's these people that run video game organizations that don't understand how the video game business works. So it's just, I don't know. I'm very tickled and amused by all of this, as you can see. But I am not a legal expert. I'm doing a very subpar job of explaining all of this stuff without having that legal expertise. That's why I would definitely, like I said, read the articles that are coming out, and they break it down in a way that's easily understandable, and it's pretty good. But it's also kind of sad, in a way. But I guess it is what it is. But they are done for now. I think they are picking back up. I think I read that they're not picking back up until August, where Sony is going to have to testify. And apparently there's some rumors going around that Sony is going to have to admit to some very interesting things, or some very interesting things are going to come up during discovery. So I'm curious to know about that. There was the leak because they didn't properly black out their documents. The judge actually had to tell them, hey, stop using Sharpies. People can see through those. And there was some some information that came out this past week about how much it cost them to make the last Horizon game and Last of Us Part 2 and stuff like that. So it's once again, it's just like this comedy of errors, these dumb things like, don't use a Sharpie to block out confidential information. It's going back to like the Alex Jones trial where the lawyer just gave them text messages and stuff. It's like, where do you find these people that are high paid lawyers? And, I don't know. But that's gonna wrap up the news and wrap up the show for this week. So coming up on the channel this week, so I will probably stream on Tuesday because, like I said, it's a holiday here for us. I have the day off. I'm not sure what I will stream, but we'll probably stream something. And then, I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully some games pick up, throughout the week. Maybe there's some indie title that comes out. But otherwise, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be talking about next week. But we'll find something and do that. But in terms of other videos popping up, I'm hoping to record Full Motion Sickness this week and get the new episode up either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week. So we will have that. There'll be more YouTube shorts popping up along the way, and all that fun stuff. And it's gonna be a good old time around here. So before we leave, Christian, any parting words for our audience before we let them go?
My plan is to become as vile as possible to ruin any success you might have with this. Next week will be my experiment, full frontal robot nudity.
I look forward to it. See you next week.